So my name is Lowell, pronouns he, him, and I'm the Gauntlet Gaming Community Manager. As well, I am the author of Age of Ravens blog, which, hey, we won an Emmy a few years ago. It was pretty cool. I've got it. It's a medallion. It's much heavier than I thought it would be. And today's topic that I'm kind of going over is discussing is kind of my history with hacks, and I've called it TTRPG hacks and getting games to the table. The Gauntlet and this community as a whole has been very good as an access way for me to do that and to, avoid excuses for things. I have written a lot of hacks. People who are in the actual Zoom meeting, I've given them a link to the folder that have a lot of examples of the hacks that I've done over the years of various different levels. And some of them are modest, some of them are bigger. Some things that aren't in there are new mask playbooks that I posted on the blog recently, a couple of the 24-hour RPG games that I've written, those kinds of things. I like writing hacks, and I like being able to get those in front of people. So I am here to encourage all of you to do that. And I want to talk about what I mean by a hack. A hack is a new game which changes or adapts elements of an existing game or system. And it can go very far afield from what the original game was. I'm going to try to refer to game lines as games like Changeling or Blades in the Dark, and I'm going to try to remember to refer to systems as sort of the core engines that power things like World of Darkness, Forged in the Dark, those kinds of things. The mutant system is another one. So, because I like breaking things down into lists and taxonomies, I imagine hacks in sort of 4 levels. We've got hacks that are rules tweaks. I've done this quite a bit. There's a lot I like about Modiphius's Star Trek Adventures 2D20, but there's some things I don't like. So one of the things I did is an express hack that changes some core rules, throws some things out. Another hack I did was I took Night's Black Agents and changed the core resolution system there, made it more PBTA for the actual action resolution system. We ran a long campaign using that. And at the end, people were like, that was okay. Maybe not better than the original system. And that was okay. We learned something in doing that. Another thing are reskins. And I have to give honor to the patron saint of reskins. That is Rich Rogers, who continuously does this with both his work on Gauntlet City comics in the past and now Star Wars Saturdays. His reskins of Hutt Cartel started kind of as a very modest reskin and now have taken a life of their own as people have worked and iterated and developed that. Also Swoop Gangs, which is built from the One Percenters motorcycle gang. These are exciting new games in their own right that build very much an existing system to new kinds of setting. There's also the adaptation of an existing game sort of engine to a radically new system, like using Forged in the Dark, for example, to do something like Battletech or Necromunda or something like that. That's moving it over and really rebuilding a lot of it to work with it. And then sort of the next step up is whole new games that probably borrow a few concepts from existing games, but they're their own beast in many ways. And we might even call them home brews. For years and years, my home group has been playing a game that's a homebrew called Action Cards. which is a very heavily fate-inspired game that uses individual decks of cards for the players, not as useful in the online world these days. So not as exciting, but it's something that we developed. We borrowed some ideas from other places, but built a very new game. So in terms of hacks, I want to talk about sort of several major aspects. I want to hit and preview what those three are going to be, and then walk through those and some other things. I think when you're doing a hack, when you're doing an adaptation, any of these things, the first thing I think you really want to do is know why. Why is it you want to do that? And spend some time thinking about that before you sit down to do your writing or anything beyond, basic sketches. The second thing is write it and fail fast. Do quick, lazy hacks. Do quick, lazy adaptations. Try things out, see if they work or don't work, and then move on and get to further development. Because I'll talk with you about the costs of not doing it that way a little bit later in some of my garbage fire adaptations that I have done. And then last, I want to talk about some approaches to when you get to the writing process, things you might be thinking about. Now, this is very much my perspective on things. Your approach to workflow, your approach to writing, your approach to development may be very different, but I'm hoping there'll be something here useful to you to take away, and at the very least, to take away the message that yes, you can do this. It is fun. It is a great activity to indulge in. So let me talk about that first step of analysis. I think that starts with, okay, you've got your idea, you've got your pitch. Maybe there's something you don't like in a particular game, or you have a new idea for a setting and you want to throw something into that. The thing you want to be thinking about is, what is it you want it to do? Why do this? And what are you gaining from doing this? Is bringing this game over to a new system going to add some dimension to it? Is it going to allow you to go in different directions? Or even as simply as this is, I would really enjoy doing this. I would really enjoy doing the hack. That is a valid reason for doing it. But I think that you want to think about what that is, why you're doing it, and try to be clear with yourself about what that involves. I have in my sort of quiver a set of hacks that, like, I want to do because they sound cool to me. Like that's my baseline reason. But when I sit down, I still haven't quite figured out like what I want them to do, what I want them to look like. My example right now is one of the white whale things is I like fading suns. I like the idea of fading suns. And I'm going to be running the new fading suns next month. But I've been trying to figure out what it is I like about that idea. Maybe it's just the pretty pictures. I'm not sure. And because I haven't been able to kind of figure that out, each time I've sat down to kind of go, okay, if I wanted to put this into PBTA or Forged in the Dark or something else, I haven't been able to figure out what I want from it. And that's been a problem. So I think thinking about that is important. One of the important aspects for me is that when we're designing, when we're writing, when we're thinking about this, is we're thinking about what the game actually looks like at the table, what the play actually is. And we're writing to that effect, and we're thinking about that when we're putting it together. And a lot of times that requires us to, take apart what the game experience is. If we're taking apart, say, for example, as I've done, changing the Lost, and we're trying to bring that over into another system. I spent a lot of time thinking about what makes that setting cool to me, but also when I've played the game in its original form, I thought about the things that I really enjoyed or that I focused in as a GM, and I thought about the stuff that I ignored. The heavy details of contracts, the certain aspects of the hedge, anything like that. Getting a sense of what you want to focus on and what you want to discard. Because I will say this, literalism in conversions or hackings is your enemy. One of the traps that can happen, I think, and it's happened to me, it may not happen to you, but it has happened to me, is where I think I have to be kind of one-to-one in my adaptation of original material or ideas to the system that I'm working in. I think that that's a trap. And I think that you can save yourself a lot of work ahead of time by thinking about what it is you want to focus on. If you are hacking to create something new, like Monster Care Squad came out last year. I think Monster Care Squad has a great pitch. And it has a great pitch because it's telling you about a very different set of activities you're going to be doing at the table, that you're going to be doing investigations and you're going to be figuring out how to help monsters who are hurt. That's a great pitch. And it's something new. And it really tells the people who are listening, this is what the play cycle is going to be. This is what we're going to be doing. So I think that's going to be important. Another thing that I think is worth thinking about when you go to do a hack, when you go, oh, I really want to do this thing, is to assess how much work it's going to be. Is rewriting this game to create, a full Dostoevsky, a simulationist RPG, how long am I going to have to spend on this? Is that worth the time? Do I feel strongly enough about this that the amount of time that this might take, is it going to require completely rewriting all of the playbooks? Is it going to require building a whole new set of advantages and disadvantages? Is it going to require a whole lot of GM advice and setting materials? Think about that before you go in. And if possible, this is one of my first steps when I go to do a hack, is I will make a list of, if I were to hack this, if I were to change this around, here are the things I would need to do. Here are the systems that would need to get rewritten. Here are the systems that could stay the same. And give myself a really baseline assessment of that. I think being really realistic at the start will help you in the long run. A lot of times when you go to hack something, you will find that other people have done similar work out there. It's worth taking a look at that stuff. Look at what other variations and versions people have done, and figure out what it is about them that works for you or doesn't work for you. I think it's fair to say, even for games that you love, to go, like, I love Masks, for example. I think Masks is a dynamite game, but there are a few points of friction for me. The way that end of session is handled, the way that changing people's labels in play kind of breaks the flow. Those are things that bother me. And if I were going to try to do a variation or rewrite, I would kind of start with those things. And if you find a hack that is similar to what you're doing, like when you read through it, at what point are you going, ooh, they didn't think of this? Or, ooh, I wonder if they're going to do this, and they don't. Like, that's a way to read and to engage with those materials. Another thing to think about is, as an option with hacks is, like, if you're building a cool new setting or a thematic or whatever, maybe that's what you want to focus in on. You want to focus on the flavor and the feel of the place, those concepts, and build those up, build systemless reference materials, build random tables, like Thousand Islands for the OSR is just a dynamite set of materials that have been built up over time. Each of them is great. They're all systemless. They all have amazing flavor. And one of the things about doing that task is that might be useful to someone. You might then, once you've got that systemless material put out there, that may give you a better sense of, if I were to try and build a game, build an engine for this, what I would need to do, where I would need to start to get this to work. Failing fast. What I want to encourage all of you to do is, if you have something that's been stuck in your head, if you have a game that you've been thinking about, try to get it sketched out, try to get it ready, and then put it in front of a group. If you have a play group at home, set yourself a deadline. Say, hey, next month we're going to try this. If you're running on the Gauntlet calendar, this is what I often will do. If I have assessed how long it's going to take, and I think I can get it done in the time frame, I will post it on the calendar, say 2 months out. That gives me a deadline to work towards. It gives me a concrete goal. And I know that it's a group of people, especially if I say playtest or playtest of hack, people are going to have reasonable expectations about what we're doing. I've done that several times. Hearts of Wulin started in that way. Me going, oh, I've got this great idea. I haven't finished it. I should put it on the calendar, and then I will have to finish it. And I've done that multiple times. Changing the Lost PBTA is another one of those that I've done. Right now, I'm playtesting a revision of The Veil that is also handled in that same way. I told myself I was going to get it done. I put it on the calendar, and I went towards it. One of the things you want to do is you want to figure out what your pitch is. When you have to explain to somebody what this hack is, what is the 30-second elevator pitch? And it should sound sexy. It should sound cool. It should tell people what they're going to be doing at the table. And I think you should share that pitch with people. I think you should share that hook with people. Within that, sometimes I will hear people say on forums and stuff, they'll say, I don't want to share my pitch. I don't want to share my idea until I get it done because I'm afraid someone will steal it. A, that's probably not going to happen. B, even if they do, it's going to be a very different beast than whatever you do. I think that you should get things out there in front of people, talk with them, put those ideas out there, get suggestions, get responses, get people to say what they like about the pitch that you have. The best way to start is to figure out like one of two sort of key directions, I would say. In any hack that I've done, I either start with the playbooks, because that focuses in on the sense of what the characters are like, of what the play is going to be like. I start working from there. Or I move and I look at the resolution system first, like the key elements of that and how that is going to differ. So in that sense, I'm looking at either the basic moves, if we're talking PBTA as the model, or talking about the playbooks that. Yeah, I think Steph actually made a very good comment in the chat there, that talking about the whole pitches and telling people and talking. Any game jam will be a demonstration of how different a single idea can be, how wildly, radically different those directions can go in. I would say in this day and age, the best place that you can start is with the character keeper. This is where I begin with most hacks these days, is laying out, okay, here what the playbook are probably going to be. Here's what I'm imagining in terms of the number of moves. Here's what I'm imagining in terms of the basic moves. That's a great place to start sketching things out. I will go through other materials, other resources, and look at what they have. And I will often use existing moves as placeholders from other things to rework, in particular, to think about the kinds of things that can be as moves for the different playbooks, or basic moves that do sort of what I'm trying to do in the game. And then later on, I can go back and refine, change, rethink how those are. But the character keeper is a great tool that we have now. Rather than just hitting a blank page, you can start breaking things down. When you go to write, when you go to create your hacks, when you go to present things, think about what is the minimum amount of information you would need to get this to the table. Do I need just a couple of playbooks and the basic moves? Do I need more discussion of things? Usually it's the basic resolution system that you can explain, basic moves, or that core system of this is how the dice work and this is how we resolve things. The character archetypes in general and how those fall out. You don't necessarily have to have character creation because you might be working with pre-gens. You can do that. You need to figure out how conflict works, in a sense, combat or other conflict. You need to think about healing and damage. And here I'm getting kind of like into the weeds of the crunch. You need to know people are going to take damage. You need to know how they heal from that damage. And the last thing that sometimes gets lost in this, but is like when you go to run, here are the things you're going to hit. The other question is, how do people help one another? That's going to be a common move. So characters, basic resolution, conflict, healing, and helping. If you have those pieces, I think that you have enough to get running. What would I say are things that are maybe too far in the weeds? Don't worry about experience. Don't worry about character advancement. That's like higher level, later on thinking. Unless that's like the most important thing about this game, don't think about that. GM advice, GM moves, GM principles. Those can come later once you've seen how the game plays and you know what the GM needs to know. Unless equipment is easy and kind of vital, like, for example, Forged in the Dark, Blades in the Dark, equipment is really natural, easy to set up, and fits in. I think in that case, you might do a little bit of work on equipment, but otherwise, stuff like equipment, encumbrance, those kinds of things, that stuff you can hold off, you can wait on. I mentioned that setting yourself a deadline by putting something on the calendar is a good impetus to work. I think that's really useful. As a sidebar to that, to talk about sort of my experience over the last several years, all of us have been in the great panini in the pandemic here. And I will say that my ability to focus on tasks has significantly diminished. I find it hard to sit down and write for more than an hour. I have to go and do something else. Like there are very few things besides Monster Hunter that I can do for more than an hour, or running a game that's 3 hours. That's my attention span these days. You think you have to accept that. You have to look at what your workflow is and work with that. One of the things that I have been trying recently that my sister recommended to me, and she's a professional writer, is I use voice dictation. It's available on Google Documents. It's available on your phone. If you find yourself getting stuck with typing, like you can't quite get through that, one of the things to do is to do just blocks of text, talk out loud what you're thinking about, get that raw ideas out there, and you can work with that material later. It has been a good way for me to get over the hump of things. So I want to put that out there as a tool. Some of you may already use voice to text, and if so, I admire you. That because it took me a while, and I hate the sound of my own voice. So that's an issue that goes along with that. But I'm getting better at it, and it has helped me get more done in the last few months than I had been. Another sort of mechanical add-on to that I want to mention is don't get yourself necessarily stuck in one section of the writing. I will put together multiple documents or multiple tabs of something, and then I'll work on a piece. And if I get stuck on that, I'll go to another one. I will bounce around on those things. Sometimes that can create issues in terms of consistency and version control, but it helps me keep going. When I did the Veil rewrite recently, I had several different documents. I would get to a place where I wasn't certain about what should go next. I went to another part, worked on that for a little while, and usually that cleared my head enough to go back to the original one. So really think about doing that, breaking up things into pieces. Jason Peet, who the Canadian designer and publisher, recommended this, and this is something that I've been trying to do recently. It's another way of thinking about breaking things up, is if you are doing a big hack, a big project, something with lots of pieces, break that up into multiple documents, put it in a single folder online or whatnot, but break that up. It will be much easier for you when you go to potentially lay that out, or to put it together and so on. It helps out. It does mean that you do want to make sure that you're making some notes about where you're making changes, what your version control is, especially if you're sharing like a base version. We have the game creators channel on our Slack. And if you're sharing that and maybe making changes, you want to be clear about where those changes go back to. I'm going to take another slug of coffee here. One of the dangers and the traps that I have fallen into many times, even though I tell myself, don't do this. Don't go to lay something out in a big fancy layout program, a publisher or affinity, until you've gotten a ways down. It is much more difficult to edit and to make changes once it is in a layout program. It is much easier to work and make those changes earlier on. And you'll find yourself like getting frustrated when you're making changes, and now you need to look at how the flow is going, and you have to kind of repaginate and all of those things. And most of those programs do not have great editing tools. Like I love Affinity Publisher. I think that's the name of it. But the text editing in that is not great. For example, Scribus, the free online open source page layout program, really great, really awesome. Editing in that is a nightmare. So work to get those things done ahead of time. Write it and run it. Get those minimals done. Get those things out there. And then iterate it or scrap it. But I said fast hacks. Get things that like what you need to do enough to get it to before people, in front of people. Have them try it, see what you think, and then you can say, okay, it's done. You can say, I want to make changes to it, or you can say, this is a flaming hot garbage, a trash can. Let me give you an example. And a thing I want you to avoid. I have all of the 7th C second edition books. I have run 7th C second edition several times. And each time I was like, this is not quite working for me. This is not quite right. So I, in my infinite wisdom, decided I would rewrite the core system for 7th C. This should be no problem. This should be easy to do. And it would have been, except what I decided to do was to copy out all of the text from the books and made sure I rewrote all the advantages and all the background options and all of those things to this new cool system that I had come up with. You will find a copy of that in the folder that I sent you a link to. You will see that it is many pages long. And I was very pleased. Like it looks cool. It looks sweet. Like I adapted all the stuff. I figured it out. I did a character keeper as well. I got all that stuff done. Then we went to play it. It's not good. Like, it just doesn't work. I tried to do kind of a D6 system adaptation. I thought it would solve some of the problems that I had with the original game. It did not. And that was many weeks worth of work that I did, that if I had approached it more smartly, I could have made some basic changes. I could have tried some pre-gens. I could have done that much more easily. And I could have found out much sooner the mistake that I had made, that it just didn't have the flavor that I wanted to. So this is the reason to try things out, to test things out. On the other hand, smaller versions, smaller things. Star Trek Adventures Express. I like the changes that I made to it. I made a couple of changes to some of the core things. I cut some elements out. I changed some of the talents. And we tried it, and some of it worked, and some of it didn't. And we went back and made a few more changes, and a few more changes, and a few more changes. And I like where we've gotten it. I won't say it's perfect. There's some things that I still have to figure out about, but I did small bites, and I was able to get it in a form that I like at that point. Why did I change Star Trek Adventures Express? One of the things about the way that STA is written originally is it looks like it ought to be how do I put this? A resolution system that when you make a roll, it covers a big area. Like you make a roll, the action happens, you figure it out, blah, blah, blah. But the way that the game is presented is the action rolls are beat by beat. So if you're going to go and people are going to sneak around a ship, everyone has to roll sneak. Everyone has to roll, the fighting damage and do, damage dice, and fights are going to last a while. It's that kind of real granular approach to things. Whereas I wanted the game to move faster. such that any particular role will either solve a problem or solve a problem with a cost or essentially have a failure state. And so those are the changes that I made to it. There are things like the effects and damage dice in Star Trek Adventures Express, which is one of the elements of some of the 2D20 games. I didn't like those because it was a separate set of D6s that you had to roll to resolve a bunch of stuff. So I cut those out. Interestingly, since I did that, a couple of versions of 2D20 have come out, both Dune and Dishonored, that do away with those damage dice, and I think move more smoothly before that because of that. Changing the Lost PBTA is one of my favorite hacks. It is an absolute mess. Again, this is another one that's in the folder. I think it's super fun to play, but it is overstuffed because I kept putting in different moves and things like that. But that's how I started, is I went through and I figured out what I liked about Changeling, what elements were the most important to me. And then I focused in on those and the playbooks. And I left a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor, stuff that was uninteresting to me. And then we played it multiple times and we kept changing like some of the basic moves and iterating and condensing things and falling back that way. But I didn't spend a long time building that. It built over time to the state that it's in now. But I started pretty modestly with some modest goals, and we tried it out, and we found that there were some good things that work with that. Couple of things about actually writing stuff that I want to emphasize. Whatever you do in terms of documentation and presentation, and maybe if you're just doing a character keeper, I think it is absolutely fine just to do a hack in a character keeper and hand that to people. As long as you have like, here's how character creation works. If you're making characters, here's basic resolution, and then you can make your other choices there. But if you're doing a document, especially preliminary documents for people to work from, think about when somebody is at the table playing with this material, what do they need to know? Can I put those elements of what they need to know in one place? And then what can I do to make it easier to find things to get around? Obviously, if we're writing like an online document, we're probably not building an index, but Microsoft Word and Google Docs have easy ways to build a table of contents, especially with hyperlinks. That just means that you're going through and you're being consistent by marking things with headings and doing that. That's one really excellent way to make it easier to work with, but also figuring out like the elements that people are going to have to go back to again and again and putting those in the same place. I'm surprised how many big games and games that I like kind of don't do this. I think Blades in the Dark is one of the best games for teaching. Like like when you read through it, you're like, oh, it builds on itself. It's smart. It shows you how it's going. But I also think Blades in the Dark, when I get it to the actual table, I can never find what I'm looking for. The new Fading Suns 4th edition book has no index, even though it's well over 300 pages. And the material that you need to know for character creation is spread all over the book. Even though it has here's the quick rules for character creation, it still directs you to other sections for basic things like derived stats and things. That's a bad choice. So think about what people need to have to play and what they're going to be looking at when they actually get to the table. As an add-on to that, when possible, use alphabetical order. Even if maybe thematically it doesn't quite work, put things in alphabetical order. That's a logical key for people. I would suggest that if you've got a set of basic moves on a playbook, put those in alphabetical order. Mark those in that way. It allows for people to quickly look, and if they have to go back and re-examine something, it gives them a keynote for it. I think that's really important. As a related point, don't underestimate the power of parallelism, of writing, like, let's say you have obligation questions or bond questions or things like that, writing those in the same format so that people get used to, this is how this is laid out, this is how this question is structured, this is what these pronouns mean in each of these sections. Doing the same thing with moves, trying to be kind of parallel when you have moves that are similar, writing them so they're laid out with the same order of key information, order of structure. That's a good editing pass thing to do, is to look for opportunities to put simple things like lists in parallel order so that it doesn't look like just a jumble of information. It makes it easier for accessibility. And then again, we're doing this meeting online. Most of you have played online, but I think it's worth thinking about, keeping in mind how your game is going to play in an online environment. There are some games that have real challenges for that. Alice is Missing is a game that has some challenges for that, but they baked in materials for running online into the basic game, and there's discussion about that in there. If your game has accessories or cards or add-ons, think about how that's going to get presented in a simple way to the players. Let me stop talking here for just a second and see if there are questions that people have that want to throw out here in the chat before I kind of amble on. Does anyone have anything that you'd like me to cover or discuss or ask here? I'm committing the cardinal sin of asking the table openly rather than directing the questions. How much play experience should you have with the game before hacking? So I'm going to answer that question in this way. I think you need to play, or at least have watched an actual play of a game that you're going to hack at least a couple of times. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule. Like, play it at least once or watch a video of it at least once, because I found when I don't do that, and I have, where I've just read a game and gone, oh, yeah, I think I can hack this or I can do this. I found that I walk into traps. There's a lot of things I didn't expect about sort of core issues of play. One of the first things that I wrote years ago, this is another one that is in the book, the folder rather, is a game called Crow's Mantle. And this is something that I wrote after having just skimmed through PBTA. And I was like, oh, this seems easy. I know what's happening here. I did not know what was happening there. And that game reflects that lack of knowledge. And Rich Rogers was very nice when we played that, at not calling me out on that until after we were fully done with it. I think that you don't have to have run months of it. You don't have to know all of the deep grit of the system. But I think you do want to kind of know what the basic flow is. You want to have a session or two. I think that would be, for me, the minimum, not because it's a hard rule, but because it will save you problems in the long run. Besides Scribus, Google Sheets, what tools are useful for drafting? I have used Google Sheets as my primary tool for that, and Microsoft Word and the Excel sheet. I know some people especially if they've used it in their workflow, have used Scrivener. Scrivener is a book publishing tool. It breaks things down by chapters, by cards, by things like that. It does not help me because it's not the way I visualize things. I think that that's one of the things that you want to try and do. If you're a person who is comfortable with mind mapping, if that's something you do, that's another way to approach getting things down on paper, getting things down and written out. I would say that like you should find the tools that you're using for other kinds of thinking to do those sort of drafts there. What's the best way of getting feedback? Chris R. writes. This is a really interesting point. It's kind of a subsection, so I'm going to dive into this. We did earlier this year. Is it this year or was it last year? Oh my God, time has no meaning anymore. A playtesting weekend on the Gauntlet where people posted games to playtest, and we did a brief kind of audio seminar on feedback and playtesting and things like that. One of the things that I discovered in talking with some people that did the playtesting, the people who were less, how do I put this? The people that had a less useful experience with their playtesting were people that had not clearly defined for their group that were doing the playtesting what the intent of the game was and what they wanted to know, what they wanted to look at. I think in anything where you are asking for critique or you are yourself giving critique, it's so important to know what the intent of the moment is. Do you want feedback on X or Y? That's the other thing, is getting permission for what you want feedback on, what you want information on. But until somebody really knows what your intent is with the game, and I mean by the pitch, what feel you want for it, why you did it, what you were going for, laying that out ahead of time. If you don't lay that out, they will ascribe their intentions to it. They will describe what they think the game does. That's one of the issues I sometimes had very early on with Hearts of Wulin, where there were some very open playtests, and I got feedback that this game did not do X, Y, or Z, where X, Y, or Z were things like detailed, specific, gritty combat, or things like that, which is not what that game is about. It is not what I wanted to do. It's what other games wanted to do, and I think is a reasonable approach. But as a result, I got feedback for a different game than the one that I was trying to get feedback on. Sometimes you won't get feedback, and that is the sort of the issue with that. But stating what your intent is, stating the kind of feedback that you do want, and trying to do it casually. Written feedback in the kinds of fast hacks that we're doing I think it's asking too much of people, but I think taking a half hour to sit down and talk about what people dug about it and where they had questions, I think that's a useful tool. That would be my suggestion. Yeah, and I think Steph kind of echoes a point I had there. You can start hacking before you play a game, but you should play at some point in order to understand like why a game does a thing. I think that's a really much clearer way to state it than I did. So I would say that. Have I ever done a hack by lifting scenarios from one system and then putting them into another system? Yeah, actually, I have a couple of my own sort of go-to scenarios that I've thought about that I have, but there is a scenario for a game called Weapons of the Gods, which is an old game by the co-authored by Jenna Moran, and it has this brilliant introductory scenario where the players go to a place, they want a thing, they have to go through a set of competitions and contests, and then there's a conflict. And that basic structure I have used and reused, and it's I use it because it's fun. It has kind of a carnival atmosphere to it, and it also hits on a lot of the key points of play. Introductory scenarios from books, well-written ones, like starter scenarios, are really good things to borrow and to rework and to play with. It's a good way to test out the key elements. And yeah, Puckett makes a really good point. We had a very strange sort of iterations. Alan Rees originally used a game called Operators by Kyle Simons to try and run Nice Black Agents. And he tried working from one of the scenarios that was available for Nice Black Agents and playing that out with that different system. And it didn't quite work. And Alan worked from there on a couple of iterations, and that's how the game that he published via Zine Quest last year, Against the Dark Conspiracy, how that eventually came to be, is that kind of iterations and building on those things. Let me say a few. I'm going to hit here just a couple more minutes of like what I think are like the really important things I want to get to talk, and then I want to come back and like really open it up to questions. Take a look at the games that you want to be adapting or using. Do they have an SRD? Do they have a system reference document? Take a look at that. See what is available for it. Look and see what the limitations are of it. Read through it. Note that when an SRD is out there, the SRD doesn't necessarily cover all of the tech that's in the game. For example, Legacy Life Among the Ruins has an SRD, but there are approaches to play that come from the legacy game Free from the Yoke that are not present in that SRD. So you need to probably talk to somebody if you're going to be using those elements there. Some games are offered via Creative Commons. Masks is Creative Commons. The Veil is Creative Commons. Look and see what the limitations are on that. What is being said, what version of Creative Commons is being used, and what your rights are within that. Another thing that's out there more and more these days is the creation of community content. This is like the DM's Guild. It's all of the stuff on World of Darkness. There's a whole bunch of material being published there. There are a lot of companies that are doing that. I want you to be very careful if you decide to go that direction and if you decide to publish that. A lot of those things take control of the rights that you do, about what you can do with the material later. You may get access to a cool setting or a cool world, but there's a real cost to you of not being able to potentially reuse that, or potentially using your ability to draw on those ideas later. Unless you're really invested in that and want to go down that road, I would be very, very cautious about that. At least if you can, talk to someone else who has been in that scene before you. other writers or designers or developers that have done that. Ask them how they feel about it. Would they have gone that way? Would they have done that? One of the things that is a common hack, and I've talked about this with my Changing the Lost PBTA game, is you adapt a existing setting or property, not for profit, but to be put together to, play out. And that's great, especially if we're just posting it for free or whatever. Not a lawyer. We'll just say that. Not a lawyer on any of this stuff. But like, I love my Changing the Lost PBTA hack, but I can't do anything with it besides give it away for free. To get that to somewhere, I would need to really re-examine the base, like setting conceptions and things like that, and pull out those things that are like real core identity content from Changeling, rethink it in a different way. And I might do that at some point, but that's going to be a lot of work. And if I had come at it from another direction originally, if I had considered that and maybe started from a different premise and then built the pieces on that I wanted, it would be much easier for me to make something of that. And I think it's one of the best things I've done, but it's also something that if I do want to do something saleable to put on drive-through or itch.io or whatever, that's going to be a lot of work. And I have to be really cognizant of that. So I would encourage you, if you are spending significant amount of time, like more than a fast hack of something to adapt an existing idea or an existing property, you think about how you might make changes to that to get it away so it is not infringing on an existing IP or an existing area. So again, not a lawyer, but recommend that you do that. Our venues now, as you all know right now, are essentially sharing things online, itch.io and drive-through RPG. Itch.io has a lot of advantages in that it's easy to get things up on there. It has a nice large group of people who are writing, but it has terrible search. It's hard to find things. It can get lost and buried. Reviews are hard to do. There are a whole set of structural things, but you can get it up there. You can do betas. You can do versions that get iterated on and reworked. That's great. Drive-through RPG is another option that's out there. Drive-through RPG has two approaches, and this may have changed since the last time, but basically you can set yourself to be publishing on drive-through non-exclusive or exclusive. Non-exclusive is a lower rate of return, like they take more, is my understanding, but exclusive, it gives you a little more money. However, if at any point you want to become non-exclusive, there is a long period. You have to notify them, and I think there's a multi-month period before you can shift out of that. So that's a note of caution I want to put out there for you. I can't say much about Kickstarting. I know other people have done Kickstarters. I've been like insulated from that in some ways, but there's a number of zine quests. There are game jams is another great way to get exposed out there. Right now, there are a number of people, Jason Pete and some other people who have been putting together free layout tools and materials for designers. I encourage you, if you want to do that, to hunt those down, to do searches on Google for that. Some of it will be, access to free fonts. links to places where you can use copyright-free artwork. So there's a lot of tools out there for doing things. If you're not great with graphics and you don't necessarily want to muck with artwork and stuff, one of the other ways that you can jazz up the place is thinking about the colors that you're using, for the cover or for markings, things like that. There are also tools and guidelines out there for making your documents accessible. What fonts work, what colors work, not to use background images on pages, things like that. I encourage you to look at those kinds of things. Think about your layout for accessibility. All right. There's some other notes in this document, the outline that I gave you, but other questions or ideas or things you want to talk about or games you're thinking about or hacks that you're working on. One of the things we're thinking about on the Gauntlet, I know that Ray Najati did this now once, and we had hoped to do this year, but we haven't, but it's still sort of on our stack, is the idea of doing a game designer camp where a group of people get together to work and share things. I know Steph has been working on doing a writers group that includes game writing and general writing. So we're trying to look at ways to do that. Other questions about particular systems, hacking particular things? I'm going to give you another minute or two, and then I'm just going to drink this coffee. Anybody else? Okay. Well, if there's nothing else that anybody wants to talk about, questions or comments, are there any hot button topics to shy away from? That's a really good question. What I will say is this. One of the reasons that Hearts of Wulin works is because I went and got someone with a Chinese cultural background to write all of the cultural materials. Anything that even vaguely touched on cultural stuff, they wrote, and that's Joyce Cheng. And then I took the time and we got Elin Wang, who did our sensitivity and cultural reading. And I tried to make every change that they suggested because all of them made the game stronger. I would say that if you are doing a game that has and interacts with issues of accessibility, of gender, of those kinds of things, you definitely want somebody to read them. I would recommend to anybody to have an accessibility reader, to have a sensitivity reader for anything they're doing of any substance, like especially if you're getting it published. If you're putting it out there for publication, I think it's incumbent on you to do that. And that may mean money to do it. But if you even vaguely think that you're touching on any hot button topics or just general topics that are working with another person's culture, I think that you really need to do that. Get readers and pay your readers. I think that is important. Any thoughts about picking a system to hack? Like, I know what kind of story game, what kind of story I want a game to tell. I'm not sure if it works better with PBTA, Force in the Dark, Gumshoe, etc. Yeah, I will say one of the things that for me is when I'm looking at this is, for example, Powered by the Apocalypse. Powered by the Apocalypse has a really basic core set of resolutions. I know what the pieces and parts are of that. And it's really good at emulating a particular genre. It's really good at telling a particular kind of story. It is not as good telling a story where you're doing a more generic thing, or like telling a story where you're not sure what the genre is, where you're not sure how to get that pitch. Gumshoe is a great game if your primary focus is on specific problem solving or mystery solving. Like otherwise, I think you're losing some strengths if you're not doing it for that. Forged in the Dark is an interesting case because Forged in the Dark has a lot of modules to it. On the one hand, you can say that Forged in the Dark is just that resolution system of the D6s and the scale and stress and so on. But then you've also got Forged in the Dark that is about the downtime action. But then you've also got Forged in the Dark that's about the crew generation. Look at what those pieces are, and are they things that fit with what you want to do? Do you need to have a crew? If you don't, then maybe Forged in the Dark is not the game you want, because there are these pieces that are you're going to have to necessarily jettison. Suggestions to play to find existing hacks, or is it really brute force Google searches? I would say itch.io is a good search where it works. One of the things for drive-through RPG is there is an ability to look at everything by system. That's one of the components there. So if you do want to do things, you can check that. And then I think to kind of confirm what you said there, Chris, asking on the Gauntlet or asking in your gaming discords or things like that, what people have done, what have they seen. Will asks, are there any signs to determine whether a hack is working well or not working well? One of the signs that a hack is not working well is if you find yourself like wanting to change it when you're running it. If you find yourself uncertain about a rule, if you find players are confused, those are friction points. That's one of the things you should be looking for. Is when I went to run this, I made I kind of mentally made this change. Maybe kind of unconsciously made this change. It's worth going back and looking at the rules after you've run something seriously and make sure that you did run it as you wrote it. And if you didn't, that's a good place to make changes. I think you will know if a hack is not going well, if it doesn't work for you, if at the end you are like you're not happy with it. You're not happy with how it's going. Now, some of that will be your own nervousness, but you can often see when something is not quite clicking. Chris Rucker writes, listed case studies. We'd love to hear more anecdotes. If it's convenient, I'll come to a couple of those things. Are you aware of any other safeguards like the illegal rule to discourage is one example of white supremacists from playing a game? Safety tools. Even if you are putting something out there as just like, hey, here's a hack I've done, reference safety tools. I want it to be that at some point, people would never even think about putting out a game without some form of layered safety tools. I think that's really important, and making that just a commonplace accepted thing. I would say that. And Steph mentioned again, smartly and clearly, you can literally search SRD on itch.io. And there's a bunch of SRTs on there. There's a bunch of stuff like this is the dinosaur that I am. I will willingly admit there's Caltrop, Carta, Charge, Russian Alone. There's a ton of game systems out there with SRDs that I have no idea how they work, but people are loving them. So yeah, follow that and look for what's working there. A couple of let me give you examples. So one of the things that Daryl asked me about, and I still haven't gotten back to him, that I've been working on, is using Brindlewood Bay to do Riverdale, and basically the idea of doing kind of a weird high school with the mystery stuff. One of the things that has been a challenge for me as I've been trying to do that is figuring out how much of the romance and high school like clique stuff and the battle on that side and sort of social things, how much that play has to balance against the mystery. And then like, what's the meta mystery? How do I feed that into that? That is a triangle I have not figured out yet. Like, there's a game, Bubble Gumshoe, that's out there. That's the Gumshoe, like high school Veronica Mars game. And like, I don't think it has figured out what it wants to do in terms of that. It has this incredibly elaborate, like, social throwdown system where you have to calculate out bonuses and things that are really frustrating. It's that kind of sometimes pieces about what the game play could be that gets you stuck. And as a result, I've gone on to work on other hacks, and I have to come back to that because I haven't quite figured it out. Randomizers. How much is too much? Is the Jenga tower needed for Wretched Alone too much to ask for people for a randomizer? I think that's a real challenge. Now, at the Jenga, there are some workarounds in terms of having rolls that once somebody has rolled a number, if it's rolled again, then that creates the fall. I think that's a thing. I think cards are a real challenge these days to do as a randomizer, but we're getting better about those. And I love cards. Like, I love cards. But there are a few tools out there now to do decks and things. Drive-through RPG, drive-through cards. And this is particularly if you were playtesting face-to-face. It is possible to set up a deck of things and do the design on it, do the templates in layout, and get a printed copy as a proof copy, but not put those out there for general sale. So that's a possibility. It doesn't get sold, it isn't listed, but you can have a deck that maybe you're using to supplement your own game. I do think that you have to be cognizant about what the costs are of that. If I'm doing a game that's based with cards, there are a lot of people who aren't going to be able to play it. It's going to be a lot more work. I may have to do a lot more adaptations. If I do the Jenga tower, I mean, the game may be dynamite. Like, Dread is really cool, but it's really hard to play online. And I think you have to recognize that those choices are that. I love action cards. I think action cards is like my favorite homebrew game. We played it all the time, but we haven't played it for a few years because of the pandemic, just because we haven't been face-to-face. And I can't really run it online. I think you have to be honest with yourself about that as a cost. All right. Well, because my throat has gotten super dry, am going to stop here. I want to encourage you, if you are thinking about a hack, if you are working on something, if you want to talk about it, if you want to show it, again, if you're part the Gauntlet community, if you're on the Gauntlet Slack, we have a channel that is for game designers to talk about what they're doing. I really encourage that. If you want to talk with me about what you're doing, I'd love to talk with folks about it at any time. I just want people to write stuff. I want you to get the kinds of games that you're interested in at the table, be willing to do that. It doesn't have to be a big, long production number. And I think you will be more satisfied if you can like get it done. So fast, lazy hacks are the name of the game from my perspective. I am going to, on that note, stop the recording.